So the next part I wanted to make sure we talk about is the READMEs, because the READMEs, as it's one of your items in the actual rubric and everything, right? But you want to make sure that you do a good README. And if you guys remember, like, what's the point of the README? Can someone just kind of quickly summarize, like, what's the point of having a good README for your GitHub repo?
To explain your project, basically, to explain what's on that page, what it's about, where the resource, whatever resources you need are, how you go about reproducing what you did.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the main thing about your README is that you want to say, hey, like, this is what my project was doing. Like, this is what my project is. It's a quick summary, essentially, which makes it nice and easy for basically someone coming across your project, whether that's a recruiter or just someone interested in your project, to understand the overall things. So I'm going to share, let's see here. I think I'm just going to share my whole screen. I think that's going to be easier this time. So let's see here, desktop 3. Yes, okay.
Do we need a requirement file or no?
So I will say, like, I think there's like on the README, you're saying like the requirements.txt. I would say if you know how to do that, like include it. It's a nice thing to have. I'll be honest, I typically will not include that myself when I have other projects. It is considered good form, but I don't know. I have a hard time telling you guys to do things that I wouldn't do myself, that I don't do myself. So I would say if you feel up for it, go add it in. Otherwise, don't stress out too much about it. I think the main thing is going to be the overall, like, writing up like your README and making sure it's clear what is going on. So that's why I have a little example here. So this is actually something I borrowed from someone else that kind of wrote like a general like README for data science. So just kind of like, no, this is not like my own, but it's kind of, I think it has a good example of like what you should look at. So let's hear. Oh, this outline's not gonna go through, that's fine. All right, so here's the example. So the first thing is basically your title of like your project. And usually it's a good idea to like have a title that is descriptive. And I think I like this description of it, like this is spelled title, but like that recommends an action. So like a good title can be like just a title that's fair. It's like, you know, analysis of, or like modeling King County, you know, home prices. That's a good, like, it's a fair enough title. It's descriptive enough where someone will understand what you're trying to say. But a better title might be something like you found, let's say you found that, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's not true also and like throw you guys off, but I'll just say like, let's say your big realization is that the bigger your house, like the more square footage, the higher the price. So I might say, put my title like, you know, kind of catchy where it's like, oh, like buy bigger homes for like, buy bigger homes or something like that. Or, you know, saying, oh, bigger homes are worth the money. Like that would be kind of your title. And that's kind of the idea where you might have a title that kind of recommends saying what you should actually do with this information. Does that make sense? Okay. I will tell you is that like, depending how creative you are and depending how like, you know, how good you feel that day, you might come with a title that's just like, oh, I don't know, like there might not be anything interesting. That's fine too. Don't like spend all night trying to figure out like the perfect title. A title is better than no title. And then talking about a subtitle underneath here.
You mean like don't waste your time doing this?
I would say don't waste an unreasonable amount of time doing it. So, so you don't want to spend, you know, 3 days all night thinking like, what should my title be and not do anything else. That would not be productive. But I will say is that having at least a title is useful, especially when that's like says what you're doing. A subtitle basically like is describing your analysis. You can basically, that's kind of like your boring title, like, you know, saying, okay, like this is kind of like saying what you were doing. Okay. Authors, this is kind of nice is that if you do have a project with other people, you might want to add like, you know, who was the actual person, but I would put your name on here. Like I would actually put your real name on here, especially because most people's GitHub usernames are not going to be their actual name, or at least their complete full name. So put your real name here so people can find it. Plus it makes it easier to actually find it like in Google search and whatnot. Okay. And then actually stating what the point of this project is. So the business problem, like what are you trying to solve? And then also including, like, this is a nice place to put it. It's just like, hey, where does this data come from? Like, what are these data, and where did it come from? Like those are kind of like two initial parts. Because like one of the worst things to do, because you really don't need to add your data into your project, right? As long as you say where it's coming from. But there's so many projects that I've come across, like not this Flatiron students, but other people, where they'll do this stuff and I can't figure out where they found the data from. Like I can't reproduce this stuff. So putting this up front is really, really useful. So like all of this right here, I would say like, you know, your title, your, you know, the overall, like, what's it called? Like what's in this repo, your business problem, like saying what you're trying to solve, and the data. I say these are like mandatory. Like so you got to have a title, what the problem is, and where the data comes from. Like I would say that is like necessary for every data science project. Okay, that makes sense so far? Cool. All right. The next part in here, like just the methods, like saying like, you know, what did you do? And so this is where you might do very briefly, just saying, you know, like you can talk about feature engineering choices you've made. You can talk about things like really like big things that you would tell your stakeholders, like, oh, like these things I found in my analysis, and all that stuff. And then also saying like, kind of like, let's see here, like key, let's see here, it says key relevant findings. This might be where you might say like, what is the most important stuff that you'd want to have someone read this at and like know immediately just from looking at this one section. So for example, you might want to say, hey, this is going to be a linear regression project, you know, like, and talk about it's a linear regression. You're making predictions. You can say like, you know, some things that you've noticed immediately about like this project, you know, like say, oh, like these are things that I would want to tell my stakeholders. That doesn't have to be super long. Like it doesn't have to be in this long paragraph. It can be literally like these bullet points here, or very quick, like, you know, parts. Because if someone really cares, they should be looking at your full project. So you don't have to go like the whole story on here. Make sense so far? Okay, cool. And then one nice thing to do is just including results. Now this is where like you might not want to have, like I have seen people do this. I don't agree with it, where they'll try to put like all the results here. I would say main thing is if there are like 1, 2, maybe 3 visualizations that you would show in your non-technical presentation that you feel like summarize a lot of what you would like want them to know, that's where this would go here. And I would actually add, like, you can see there's visual 1, visual 2. This should either be descriptive enough of like what this visualization is with this title, or have a little quote underneath, at least of saying like, you know, in a sentence of like what this thing is, like why is this important? Okay. And, you know, I would say, you know, if you wanted to, you could add a little extra thing, like a little, like no more than a paragraph of saying your overall results. Your recommendations, you know, you guys should know how to do that, like what the things like they should know from there. So you can say something along the lines of, you know, based on, you know, our analysis, based on, you know, our predictive model, we would recommend stakeholders, you know, the blah, blah, blah stakeholders, like stakeholders who are looking to flip a house should do these things. And you put those recommendations here. So this should be, again, help like make it really clear for you, like also like doing your project is like, what are your recommendations? You should be able to write these out in like clear like terms, like, hey, this is what you should do. Okay. Cool. Everyone follow me so far? Awesome. Cool. All right. And then of course, like limitations, next steps, things is like your future work, like limitations of what are the limitations of your project? Like what can you not conclude from this project? And maybe what are some like future research, future steps that you would want to do to answer those limitations and stuff like that. So this is kind of, again, like kind of like your last couple slides where you have slides for your recommendations and like a slide for your like future work. That's kind of what this is going here. Okay. This is the rest of this stuff like down here, I would say is like optional. Like I wouldn't say like it's necessary, and like if it wasn't in here, I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, like this repo is horrible, you know, or this README is horrible. But it's nice things to add. So basically adding extra information of saying, you know, like if you want to say, you know, like, oh, like you can talk about like, you know, like write down here like your presentation. You can talk about maybe you had other notebooks for like multiple parts. You might organize it in here. You have your main notebook, you know, that would be really useful to kind of actually add in here. But of course, if someone's pulling it up, they should be able to figure that out. But, you know, just kind of help guiding your reader. And then one thing, like, honestly, I never do this, but it is really nice when I do see this, because I'm like, oh, when I come across a project, I'm like, oh, this is really nice. Having the structure of like, where everything is, having this already printed out. And you can write this out like manually, or I think there are even programs that you can actually, like little scripts that can actually do this for you, but it's probably just as fun just you doing it manually. And all this is right here. If you're wondering like, whoa, like how does this look so cool? All it is just like these 3 quotes. So what's it called? Whatever it's called in like code text essentially. So this would be basically just saying where all your different parts are. So again, like I said, like all of this stuff right here, it's just like little extra stuff where, oh, sorry, like up to here. It's really just like nice things to kind of help your reader just understand where to find things. Okay, cool. So that's just like an example. Don't feel like this is the rule, this is what you have to do. But I think if you follow these things, like if you follow this format, you wouldn't have a bad README. Like I would say it'd be hard to make one that's not understandable. But if you want to deviate from this, like there's no reason why you can't do that, as long, again, as it's clear for someone coming across your project to understand what's going on. Okay. Cool.
I don't know, do we have this template?
You do not, but I'm thinking I'm going to just share it. I'll make it like a little gist or something like that so you guys can have access to this. Okay.
All right, thanks.
Cool. Right. There are a couple links that I can share with you guys that I think this is it. Well, okay, I'll share this cheat sheet with you guys right now, but I'll share this also on the cohort channel. This is just like, I think these are most of the stuff that you guys probably already know at this point, using like, you know, your Markdown within Get Jupyter Notebook. There's also some stuff you might not be familiar. For example, like I like this, like I like using these task lists and stuff like this. So you can actually, it'll come up in GitHub as like little checkboxes and stuff, which can be really useful. But I think most of the stuff you guys actually probably know what's going on and everything. Okay. Yeah, I thought I had, gotta be honest, I thought I had another. Is this it? Oh, this is it. Yes. Good. I was like, where have I seen this? All right. And I do have a few websites to actually share with you guys, some resources. So you can see here again, like this is someone else's, I just literally found that like README templates, like what looks good, right? And you can see here, like very similar project title, you know, how people need to do it. You can see prerequisites installing, which I didn't talk about, but you can do this. This is much more focused on the software engineering side of things, but I have seen sometimes in data science projects, you might want to talk about these things. Running tests, deployments, these are things you probably won't be talking too much about with your data science project, but you can kind of see a little bit like what this looks like and how people read it through. Again, authors, license, you probably don't have to worry about license because you guys aren't like making anything too crazy. And just all this stuff right here. So again, these are just different templates. If you find something that's useful, like you see someone's good template, like README, like use that template or get inspired from it. This website here, Make a README, I thought it was pretty good. It basically kind of talks a little bit about like what you can do, what it can make it look like. Again, this is going to be much more focused to software engineering, but I think a lot of it will carry it over, like the idea of it come over to data science projects as well. Okay, cool. And then I think this is the template. Yeah, this is the template. I can't share this one because this is actually, you guys won't have access to it, but I can share you guys like the actual README format that I have, which I think is fine. But you can see it can hold up in here. So yeah, cool. All right. Yeah, so that's kind of READMEs. Any questions or any clarifications about the README? No? Cool. Another thing about your README is one thing I would make sure you do is clean up your GitHub repo. Put things into folders and stuff that makes sense. One thing, if you have images, for example, you might want to put a subdirectory, like a little folder, and put your images all within that little folder. If you have data, one common practice, like if you do upload your data, one common practice is to have like a folder called data or something like that and putting your data in there versus like having a CSV or multiple CSVs floating around. Note that if you do this after you do your whole like, you know, project, know that you might break your code, right? Like if you, for example, are reading that data in there, so you might want to make sure you change that aspect. This is where like if you were very like careful, as like very clean and considerate while you're like doing your code, a good practice is to say something like file name or data file name equals, and then a string to that file, and then use the data file name as a variable and import that part. That way, in case if you read, let's say, for example, you read multiple times, you know, you're not having to change every single time. You're just changing that one instance. This is also really useful to have something like if you're outputting files and stuff like that too. So if you have like multiple models. So if you have multiple models, you might want to put all of those models in like a directory called like models or something like that. So kind of cleaning that up. And again, if you're outputting your models, like let's say you're using like joblib or pickle, right? You would want to make sure that you're exporting, you know, you're exporting that file into the right place. So you can actually say, oh, instead of just saying the file name, you can do something like model / and then the file name, as long as that, I think, I could be wrong, but I think joblib actually will create a directory if it exists, or it'll give you an error, one of those two. So you just add those in there. If you are hearing my stuff and you're like, oh man, like I broke all the rules. I just, like Victor just spouted off. You can, you know, you just add a new commit. You just move things. Do you guys know how to move things on GitHub, like as a commit? So like you can do a git add, right? Like, so git add will add the things on. But if you have the file that already exists and you want to move it somewhere else, what you do is you do git mv and then what the file you want it to, or the folder, and then the new either name of it or the new location of it. So it's a little bit different. If you do it that way, it makes it nice and easy, so you don't have to like move it and then add that part. And sometimes Git understands like that you moved it over, but sometimes you do something funky. Git's like, oh, that's a completely new file, and then you upload it, and then you find 2 copies of the file on your GitHub repo. So an easy way to make sure this happens, like, oh, instead of moving it, like, you know, drag and dropping it, or if you're using command line with move, doing git mv, which stands for move, the name of the file, and then the new name of the file, which is also, that's just the location. But you can also rename files that way. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. And of course, if you guys get stuck on those things, definitely ask out, you know, like on Slack and everything, because I guarantee if you ask it, there's going to be someone else who's thinking it too. And I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of, like, I think there's a few people here on this cohort that can actually, might be a little more familiar with Git and can probably help out too. And of course, you know, if no one answers, you know, I'm still around for a while, so I'll answer. But you can also tag the DS support squad. You guys know the tag, right? Cool. All right. No? See some head shakes. So,
yeah, I didn't know that one.
Is it DS support squad? Oops, not quad, squad. So what's nice about this tag, if you say that, I'm going to make sure that's it. I won't ping. The thing is, if you do this, it will basically ping everyone. Yes, it is at DS support squad. So if you need help, it will ping. It basically pings all of the instructors. So let's say, for example, I'm not around, it will ping everyone else, and like whoever is there will hopefully be able to help out. So, you know, great power comes with great responsibility, right? Don't just start pinging like, hey, how's it going? Or like, but I don't know, I guess you could if you really wanted to. But I think you guys know how to use it properly and everything. Yeah. What's nice is that you guys are all adults. Like, I'm so used to like thinking about like when I'm thinking like middle school kids, if you give them like an inch, like they take a mile. But you guys are so much better than middle school kids because you guys are 100% better. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of everything. Let's see here. Is there any other questions? And otherwise I'll stop the recording or clarification. No, pretty good.
I just want to say that me and you were talking before everybody jumped on. I was just mentioning that that link to that book yesterday. If you actually go to the root of that website, what is it? Bookdown.org. Right there, you're going to find a whole lot more books that are available. They're all on R. That website is basically R. But you know, there's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say is that there's a lot of free resources for data science and such, like R, Python, you know, just overall stuff. And a lot of them are really great quality. Every once in a while I hear people say like, oh, there's these books that are on sale for this thing. Like, I honestly, like, I think a lot of the stuff that you guys need don't even have to be bought. There are some things that I would like even I would say yes, like if you can afford it, like it's like, oh, it's in a free version, and like there's also like you can pay for it. Like I'm saying, I'm someone who's like, oh, if you can afford it, you know, support the authors because they do great work. Sometimes I'll find a free book and I start reading it. I'm like, this is awesome, and I'll buy it because it's like, hey, like good job, author. Like you should earn points for this. But one book I will say is that I really would recommend, and it's not free. As you guys get into Mod 3, is the machine learning with scikit-learn. Do you guys know what I'm talking about on that one?
I think so.
Yeah, I'll kind of I realize I have all my shortcuts on my other computer. So this is what I want. Hands-on machine learning. I'm gonna send you guys the title on Zoom. That one I would say it's not free. I know it's not for free, but it is, if I'm going to say what one book you should buy to like understand more machine learning, that's the book. It's totally worth it. And there's 2 editions now. The second edition has color now. I highly recommend getting the second edition. They added like the author, which I can never pronounce his name, so I'm not going to try. The author is really good. I think like showing how you would practically do data, like machine learning. And what's nice too is that they do have, if you look up the hands-on machine learning with scikit-learn and TensorFlow, a mouthful, but if you look that up plus GitHub, there's also, his book is online available, like not his book, his like exercises and stuff are available as IPython notebooks. So you can run those too and kind of play around with it. But the book is definitely worth a read. I normally would talk about this when you guys start Mod 3, but of course, I'm not going to be here for Mod 3. So I give you guys a head start and all that stuff. So, yeah. Okay. All right, so I'll stop recording here then.